Welcome back to the Answers 42 podcast. My name is Dan Westine. I will be your host, as always, and it's just me. Sorry, but this is the way things are going to be from now on. It's just kind of me in your face, giving you my take on the best topics across all major sports. We will be covering a little bit of everything today. We have NBA, MLB, and NFL news for you, ranging anywhere from the conference finals in both the East and the West to NFL rule changes, PFF ranking all 32 quarterbacks and how I feel about that, plus a third of the season review in the MLB covering everything from who's a contender to who's a pretender to who might be the best player in baseball right now. So we're going to be covering a gamut. So let's get started. All right, so since we have so much to get to, let's go ahead and jump into it. First off, we're going to start out with the Western Conference Finals and a recap because, well, just basically that series is over. According to ESPN, the Lakers took a 4-0 moral victory series win, but fortunately for the Nuggets, they actually won the games, so they are going to go to their first ever NBA Finals. So yes, obviously, as you can see behind me, as you can see across my chest, I am a Colorado native. I am a Colorado fan across the board. This is the first time in my 38 years I've got to see my Nuggets make it all the way to the dance. So, as we all know, the end goal is a championship. I'm not sitting here saying that anybody should rest on their laurels, but I count this as a win for all of Nuggets Nation. Of course, we're going to push and we want that chip. We want that first chip. And so they're going to give everything they have, both on the court and in the stands. I do promise you that. So whether it is Miami or Boston, they are going to have a tough task ahead of them, especially when they come to the Mile High City.
The crowd was phenomenal. Huge shout out to our fans for continuing to make Ball Arena just a hell of a home court advantage. We really appreciate that. But this was a war.
And when they do come to the Mile High City, they have the former back-to-back MVP that has shown throughout these playoffs that he is as legit as anyone on any coast. To quote Coach Malone, this dusty old cow town has finally been put on the map by a kid from Serbia and another kid from Canada. So out of those two who had absolutely spectacular Western Conference Finals, they just ran the board no matter what you're looking at, whether it be on defense, offense, points scored, assists, rebounds. They both really kind of did a little bit of everything. You had Jamal Murray being the first player to ever average 30 points on 50, 40, 90 shooting. What that means is 50% from the field, which means any shot, whether it's a dunk or a three-pointer, means that one of every two shots he took, regardless of where it was on the floor, it was going in. Then you have 40%, which is what he shot from three-point range, which just means anything beyond the arc. He was at 40%. Then the 90 is from the free throw line. The man just did whatever was necessary, whether it was scoring 30 points and a half or just going off for, like I said, an average of 30 points a game. The only game he didn't score 30 in was game 4, which you saw Nikola go out there, have yet another triple-double. You saw Aaron Gordon just lose his mind after LeBron James thought it was okay to put his hands on his neck, which would have gotten any other player thrown out of the game. But I digress. We won't go down that rabbit hole because we're not going to talk about the Lakers. If you want to hear about the Lakers, go to ESPN. On every A block of every show, you will hear all you need to about Laker Nation. Here, we are going to talk about the team that actually won and not try to give roses to a team that got swept. So, again, you have Nikola Jokic out here averaging a triple-double through 3 rounds of the playoffs. Never been done before. I just gave you what Jamal Murray had never been done before, and I'll go ahead and give you their slash line here in the Western Conference Finals. Nikola Jokic averaged 27.8 points, 14.5 rebounds, and 11.8 assists in those 4 games. Then you have Jamal Murray, who was at 32.5 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 5.3 assists in those 4 games. Both absolutely stellar slash lines. And either one, honestly, is deserving of the Western Conference Finals MVP. That, of course, did go to Jokic, which, as you can see by these numbers alone, should lean you to believe he was the guy that deserved it. But for the sake of argument, does Jamal Murray have a case? Of course he does. Of course he does, guys. But let's stop splitting hairs. I've seen quite a few people, even those in Nuggets Nation, trying to consternate over whether or not Jokic was stat padding or whatever the case may be. That's all BS. That's just people being haters simply because they like either LeBron or Embiid. That seems to be the two fandoms that seriously cannot stand that Nikola Jokic is the best player in the game right now. I don't care how you slice it. He's a computer on the court. The man just knows where everybody is. He sees double teams before they ever even happen. So he ends up setting up guys for wide open shots. That is the difference between a Jokic and an Embiid and a LeBron James. LeBron James and Embiid, they are very selfish players. Deservedly so. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. They're both great players. But they have to be selfish to put up the numbers they do. Jokic still produces ridiculous numbers that nobody has ever accomplished before in the NBA. Ever. Nobody. Not Kobe, not Michael, not Embiid, not Wilt. Nobody. He continuously does things we have never seen before. But yet people are still trying to consternate whether or not he's great. These playoffs should have, if you are an honest actor and you're not just a hating troll, should have solidified in your mind that Nikola Jokic is a deserving 2-time MVP, and if not for a tainted voting process, would have been a 3-peat MVP. And after these playoffs, nobody can argue that he should have been. You can argue that Embiid was great, and he was. He was otherworldly for the last month, but Jokic is a guy that is on the floor every night, good or bad, injured or not. He is a guy that shows up. You cannot say the same for Embiid or LeBron. As great as those guys are, they are two of the softest players in the NBA. Jokic comes out of every game looking like he was mauled by a bobcat. His arms are beet red, scratches. The man has scars. Name another superstar of any era that has scars on their arms from people scratching them. Grown men scratching them so deep they have left scars. And yet he still does not get nearly the same calls as any other superstar. Not just LeBron or Embiid, just really any other superstar. The man gets beat on every single night, but never complains. Even in his post-game presser, after showing the world that he is the best player in the league, sweeping the Lakers, he still took the time to sit there and wax poetically about Embiid, the guy that took shots at him not but a couple of weeks ago for no reason whatsoever. But yet Jokic is such a pro, such a consummate pro. He spent at least 3 minutes of his post-game presser talking about how Embiid deserved the MVP and that anybody that says otherwise was just being mean. Well, Jokic, you're probably right, and I don't care. I'll continue to be mean. Joel Embiid can enjoy that participation trophy he got because Jokic is in the finals and has went 2 rounds farther than Embiid ever has. Embiid is the only MVP to have never made it to an Eastern or Western Conference Finals, period. That has never happened before. But yet the whole narrative all year was that Jokic didn't deserve it because he didn't do anything in the playoffs. That was just simply a cop-out for people to justify voting for Embiid, and then guys like Mark Jackson admitting that they left the man completely off of his voter roll. The admittance of so many in the national media that they absolutely pay no attention to the Denver Nuggets has been no more apparent than it has over the last few weeks, especially during the Western Conference Finals. And you even saw it after it. Everybody's been talking about LeBron James and the Lakers having the best sweep, being swept and having the best showing ever. That's insane to me. I can't believe people are actually having these things spew out of their mouths. But I digress. Let's get back to the topic at hand, which is who deserved the MVP, Jokic or Murray? I know you're probably going to think I'm going to go with the low-hanging fruit and say Jokic, and yeah, you're 100% right, because that's simply what it was. I just read you the stat lines. If you believe otherwise, again, you are just simply a hater that cannot admit that Nikola Jokic, the chunky white guy, is the best player in the league. For any of you that can't get that through your skull, I'm sorry for you. You got to have the most miserable life. But let's go ahead and move on besides that and say who had the best performance in a single game. Well, when you look at the numbers, I know you're going to say, oh, it's going to be Jokic. Yeah, you're right. And why is that? Because in game 1, the man had a 30-point, 20-rebound triple-double with another 14 assists to complete that triple-double. As much as I absolutely loved what Murray did in game 3, where he went and scored 30 points in the first half and still had a game-high 37 despite only scoring 7 points, and that all came in the fourth quarter where it was the most clutch and the most needed. Again, if you can't recognize that as an all-time great performance, then I don't know what to tell you. Stop being insufferable. Learn to love yourself. I'm at a loss for you guys. It's absolutely insane how much hate people can harbor in themselves for a person they've never met and then has absolutely no control over them or their lives, but yet has allowed them to live rent-free in their heads for whatever reason. Again, you must be insufferable. I can't stand you. So, yes, Jokic is the MVP. Jokic had the best performance. Jokic is the best player in the league. I think I got that through to y'all. So let's go ahead and move on to the last question here is what matchup is better for Denver in the finals? And if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Miami and Boston are playing in the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Celtics just staved off a sweep of their own by winning game 4 in Miami, sending the series back to Boston on Thursday. Pretty much, I think most people are going to believe and say that Miami is going to win that series, which in history, it says they will. Teams after the Lakers got swept are now 0-150 in their tries to come back from a 3-0 deficit. It's really hard to win 4 games in a row when you have another team that just needs to win 1. And they're going to be doing it multiple times on their home court. It's why it makes it just almost impossible. So which team makes it a better matchup for the Nuggets? I'm going to say the Heat, not just simply because I think the Heat is an inferior roster to Boston, which they are. Just being honest, I love me some Jimmy Butler. Don't get it twisted. I love Jimmy Butler. He is him, And in the playoffs, the man just takes it to another level. But let's be honest, behind him and Bam, there's really not much there, especially with Tyler Hero being out. There is say that he might come back. He's finally shooting, but there's no guarantee that he will make it back for the finals. With Gabe Vincent going down with an ankle injury late in game 4 that might need to be monitored and see what happens for game 5, that team has gotten really thin really quick, and they really weren't that deep to begin with. There's a reason that they're an 8 seed. They are a very impressive 8 seed. I absolutely love the way that they have mowed through supposedly superior opponents on their way to what seems to be an Eastern Conference championship. But Boston is in their way. Boston is legit. I said months ago on the Nug Life podcast here that the two teams that scared me the most in the East were Miami and Boston. People laughed at me at the time because Miami wasn't even the 8th seed. Yeah, they were still on the outside looking in. But they made it, like I said they would, and they made a lot of noise, like I said they would. It's almost like I know ball, but I digress. Let's move on. That matchup is scary with Boston if Tatum and Brown are playing at their peak and Boston is playing the type of defense they are capable of. They play like they did in the first 3 games against Miami, it's a cakewalk for Denver. But that's not typically how it happens. Again, they have to buck history and get there first. But that kind of terrifies me. If they make it there after that, coming all the way back, that would be terrifying to see a team that motivated, that talented, and the Nuggets having that long of a layoff. I really want to see Miami go out there, finish it off on Thursday, and end this break so the Nuggets can get back on the court before they get too cold and have another team coming in scorching hot. Another reason why I want Miami is because that would give the Nuggets home court advantage. That has been crucial throughout these playoffs, as the Nuggets have yet to lose a single game at home in these playoffs, in any round, period. So they are obviously playing extremely well at home. They need to stay at home. So Miami winning it is the best case scenario for the Nuggets, not just because Miami is an inferior roster, because they're not bad. They're just not nearly as deep as the Nuggets or really even the Celtics. And yes, they bucked the trend up to this point, but they've also bucked it in a weak Eastern Conference. I know a lot of people wanted to try and say that the Nuggets were in the weaker conference. I don't believe that. I've never subscribed to that. I've seen that as the Western Conference being so stacked and deep, they beat up on each other to the point where they weren't allowed, the Nuggets weren't really allowed to get a huge, to get a ridiculous record the way that Boston was, which included a 30-9 record at home for Boston. That, to me, all screams a weaker division that's really top-heavy, that allowed the top teams to beat up on the bottom teams, unlike in the West, where the bottom teams were still able to get theirs against the top, as the Nuggets saw with teams like the Jazz and the team just left my head. But the Jazz is an example, a team that's bad that beat them, or the Rockets. There we go. I'm sorry, the quote unquote worst team in the league still got a win against the Nuggets, the number 1 seed that's been there for over 130 days at this point. So the Western Conference is much, much stronger than people are giving it credit for. And so I do believe it doesn't really matter who's coming out. I think Boston would give Denver much more of a headache than Miami. But even with Miami in there, Miami's going to win a couple of games. They play ridiculous at home, and their defense is just ridiculous, especially at home. So them playing, they're going to get 1 or 2. I don't see the Nuggets going in and sweeping either of these teams, but I do see them as being the favorite and should be the favorite going into that series, even though I have a feeling Vegas just might not be able to calculate it, considering the Nuggets were the underdog in their last 2 games against the Lakers, simply because they were being played in LA. So there's my take. That's what I believe is going to go on in the finals, and my recap of the Western Conference Finals. Let's go ahead and move over to the Eastern Conference there. As we said, Jimmy Butler, possibly the greatest playoff performer of his generation. I will leave it up to y'all to give me what you think. I do believe so. The man, there's just no comparison to any other player that I could ever think of in the drastic differences between their performances in the regular season and the playoffs. Like, he is the anti James Harden. Like, he is the guy that actually shows up when it matters instead of just stat padding during the regular season and then not being able to be tough enough in the playoffs. There is no player tougher than Jimmy Butler. The man, he is him. Just plain and simple. I mean, I love the fact that people kind of took that, give him the Hemi Butler nickname. Absolutely perfect. The man has a dog inside of him that I have not seen outside of maybe Michael Jordan, especially when it comes to the playoffs. Right now, he has averaged 26.8 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 6 assists in the 4 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. The man just is so steady, so just consistent. It's insane.
After a game like this, how do you personally kind of avoid from getting too low yourself?
Stay consistent. Do the same thing that I do, that we do after every game. We're going to listen to some music. We're going to drink some beers back there. I'm going to go have some wine. I don't think that you could just focus on basketball all the time. You have to be able to, get away from the game a little bit. Think about it. But at the end of the day, you fall back on, your habits, how consistent you're going to be. And myself and my teammates, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to smile. We're going to be in this thing together like we always are. And we're going to go get one on the road.
All right. So that is my take on the Western Conference Finals. Who should have been the MVP? Who had the best performance? And who's the best matchup for the Nuggets in the NBA Finals? So let's talk about the Eastern Conference Finals. That will determine who that matchup will be. And as of right now, everything's leaning towards Miami taking the 8th seed all the way to the championship. Why is that? Because they have their own 3-1 lead. They had a chance to sweep Boston on Tuesday. Unfortunately, they weren't able to, so that extends their series, which gives them a little bit of an advantage over the Nuggets. As I've always been a proponent of a team not having to sit for an extended period of time, because it always seems to backfire for whatever team it is that's stuck sitting waiting a week or so. It could be as many as 9 days before the Nuggets are able to go out there and play another team on the court, which gives them plenty of time to get distracted. I don't like that. I don't want to see them lock. I want to see them stay locked in and playing the way that they are. I'm not saying that they won't if they have a 9-day layoff, but it just typically seems to happen that way, especially in Colorado sports, as we can all attest to the 07 Rockies and them getting swept by Boston after they came back from a 3-0 lead or series deficit against the Yankees back then. So it's possible. It's happened in other sports. Hasn't happened here in the NBA, as I've stated before. Teams with a 3-0 hole are 0-150 in the NBA history when it comes to coming back. Boston might be able to do it, as you can read on e5280sports.com, where I wrote a recap of every single game in the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. So you can get a much more broad brush for each game there if you like. Here, we're going to condense it all down. So, is Jimmy Butler the greatest playoff performer of his generation? I do kind of believe so. I don't think there's ever been a player like him. He is the anti-James Harden. He is the guy that might not blow your socks off in the regular season. He's still very good, but he's not elite. But when that playoff time comes, he becomes a bona fide superstar. Right now, as you can see in the ticker below me, Jimmy Butler, I lost his stats. There we go. Sorry. 26.8 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 6 assists in 4 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. The man has shown up every single night, and he's been accompanied by a gang of undrafted free agents and second-round picks that just seem to have a new guy step up every night outside of game 4. Obviously, whether it be Caleb Martin going off for 25 points in game 2 or Duncan Robinson going off for 22 points in game 3. It just always seems like there's somebody on that Miami bench that comes to life and supports Jimmy Butler while he's doing his normal thing. It's inexplicable. I don't really think anybody has a real true explanation. I think Jimmy Butler did a great job in the post game after their sole loss so far in the Eastern Conference Finals, where he started it by singing "Everything's Gonna Be All Right." That was pretty funny. And then when he was asked how they stopped from getting themselves too low, he just simply said being consistent, going back in the locker room, drinking some beers, drinking some wine, hanging out with the fellas, and then come back and run it back again on Thursday in Boston. Perfect response, and I agree. The best way to stave off from getting too low is, again, just do your normal routine as if you're not hurting from whatever it was. Just go back, get in that routine, get back in that groove, and then come back and hit it even harder in your next opportunity. And that just seems to be kind of what Miami does. They don't really do anything flashy. I mean, yeah, you have the alley-oops to Bam and things of that nature, but they just are so just insanely consistent. They never get too high, they never get too low. No matter what the score is, they just never seem to be out of it unless you get some type of like a 15, 20 point lead on them, and even that's not 100% safe. They just keep coming. They just don't know how to quit. And that is how an underdog becomes so successful in the way that Miami has in these 2023 playoffs. They just have a dog in each and every one. All of them, like I said, they're almost all either cast-offs, undrafted free agents, G League guys, second-round picks. I mean, really, outside of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, I don't think I could be mistaken, but I don't think they got a single guy outside of those two that was drafted in the first round, anywhere in the first round, outside of those two men. It's insane what they have done by just absolutely embracing that underdog mentality, just embracing the grind, embracing the struggle, and understanding that if they are just within striking distance in the last few minutes, they have the ability and capability of getting that dub. And that's just what they've done, game in and game out. And they've shown in these playoffs, in the regular season, obviously, when they're the 8th seed, they still fought their way to that. And then all the way here to the Eastern Conference Finals, they just can't and they won't quit. And Boston wasn't ready for it. They thought it was going to be a cakewalk. They're like, oh, we're the 2 seed, they're the 8th seed. Other teams, they just didn't show up, or whatever the case is. I don't know what their true mentality is, but that's just kind of how they played. It's like they just did not take Miami seriously for 3 games, and it cost them dearly. And now they're fighting for their playoff lives. And I don't believe that the Heat are going to allow them to come back. What has made, and that is honestly really what has made Miami so dominant throughout this playoff run they've had, is just that dog-like mentality that they see the bone and they're going to get it no matter what it is they got to do. They got to dig under the fence, they got to jump over the fence, they got to run through the fence. They're going to do whatever is necessary to get that bone. And they can't quit. They can't. It's inexplicable. I don't really have any other words for it. It's just inexplicable the way that they have a can't quit, won't quit mentality. It's on another level. And I know it all stems from Jimmy Butler. And as long as he is him, the Miami Heat always have a chance. They always have a way to get that dub. And that is why they are just 1 win away from the finals. So with all that being said, can Boston complete the comeback? And if so, how? They have to play like they did in game 4. Jason Tatum has to be the best player on the floor. For some reason, I don't know why, but he hasn't been for this entire series. It's been Jimmy Butler. Even though Jason Tatum is technically the more talented player, Jimmy Butler has shown up and he hasn't until game 4. He went absolutely nuts, and that's what they're going to need. They're going to need him to be an out of this world superstar like he's supposed to be. They're going to need Jaylen Brown to play the defense that he did in game 4 that was completely lacking in the first 3 games. All those steals, using his speed to get up the floor and push the pace, those are all essential things that just were non-existent in the first 3 games. So if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can live up to their potential, I'm telling you there's a chance. It's a Dumb and Dumber chance, but there's still a chance. They definitely had and have a much better chance than the Lakers ever did. Obviously, they won game 4. Lakers didn't. So there's a chance, but it's very, very highly unlikely. They might win on Thursday at home. There's the chance, though, also that they're getting pats on the back from, when they get home and they're like, oh, look, y'all extended the series. Nobody believed in you, yada, yada. And they don't show up again in game 5. But there's also a chance that game 4 was the switch that needed to be flipped to get them to play the way that they can play. They are completely capable of winning 4 games in a row. Completely capable. The problem is Jimmy Butler and that Miami Heat team, they want this bad. Jimmy wants that ring bad. And I just don't see them allowing Boston to get it past 6 games. Boston might push it to 6 games, but I don't see them pushing it to 7. I'll say right here, right now, the Heat win in 6. That is my prediction. So that's it for basketball. Let's move to football. So in case you haven't been keeping up with the NFL, it is May, just 3 months away from training camp, by the way, though, if you haven't noticed. Yes, we are that close, but not quite there. Right now, we don't want to talk about what's going to happen in the future. We want to talk about what happened now that does affect that future and what they're going to have to learn at those training camps, which are 9 new rule changes. Some are superfluous, but there are a couple that are interesting, like the fact that they brought back the jersey number 0. To be honest with you, I didn't know teams couldn't use that number. I just thought people didn't want to because, well, we all know what 0 represents. Some players like it, I guess. I mean, especially like in baseball, you had Adam Ottavino who wore double zeros because of all the O's in his name. So, that made sense. But just wanting to wear 0, I don't know. Who will be the first one? Who do you want to see wear 0? Me, personally, I don't care. And if a player does want to wear it, whatever number they want to wear, it is what it is. But the fact that just wasn't an option before is kind of interesting to me. I don't know why they would have, stopped that from being a thing. A number's a number, right? As long as you can read the number and tell who the player is by that number and the name on the back of their jersey, does it really matter what number that is? Like, I understand that you got to have the different for coaches. It's not for players or anything of that nature. It's really more for coaches when it comes to the certain numbers you can have for certain positions. Like, you'll always notice linebackers are somewhere in the 50s. Wide receivers, tight ends are normally somewhere in the 80s. You have defensive linemen that are typically somewhere in the 90s. You have quarterbacks, kickers, and punters, which are usually in the single digits. Those are simply things that rules coaches created way back in the day, so it made it easier for them to identify who was on the field so that way they can match up better. The fact that players are getting to kind of wear whatever numbers they want has really drove players, like especially Tom Brady. He made a big old stink about it a couple of years ago in the offseason when they were talking about they changed numbers. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they allowed I think it was linebackers specifically, they were allowed to wear numbers they didn't traditionally weren't able to wear. And that he didn't like that because it would make it harder for him to determine who was the Mike linebacker. As you always hear in pre-snap reads by quarterbacks, especially like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, etc., is that 52's the Mike, 55's the Mike. That's them pointing out to their protectors, aka the offensive line, tight ends, etc., who the middle linebacker is, because that determines what side they are going to lean the protection, as they say. essentially where they might send some extra help because there might be an extra linebacker blitzing, whatever the case may be. To me, again, it's irrelevant. If some players want to wear 0 and others don't, or they want to wear 99, it makes no difference to me, especially as a commentator. I just need to know who you are and be able to read the name on the back of your jersey. As long as I can do those things, it's great. So some people making a stink about it, like I said, like Tom Brady before with the whole Mike linebacker thing, man, you're just going to have to adjust. Stop whining. Just deal with it. It's not that big of a deal. But the next one that was interesting is the one that's got coaches up in arms. You have Andy Reid out here talking about it is a precursor to us just watching flag football. And that is the new kickoff rule that allows players to fair catch on a kickoff. Previously, you could not fair catch on a kickoff. The only time you could do that was during a punt. Now they're allowing it. This really kind of is just a death knell for kick returns in general. Essentially, any player that thinks that they're going to get to the NFL as a kick returner needs to find a new job, because you're just not going to. There's no kick returns anymore. Especially in onside kicks are still a joke. I think last year they had a total of like 4% of onside kicks were recovered. The NFL really wants it more to 13 to 14%. Don't see how any of these rule changes help that. They did nothing to curb that issue, even though there was a rule proposed, I believe it was by the Philadelphia Eagles, to do the XFL thing of having a 4th and 20 try instead of a onside kick. That was obviously shot down, which I think that would have been a much better rule change than allowing to fair catch on a kickoff. And the reason that comes into play is because they're really trying to legislate the kickoff return out of the game. They have come to the conclusion that way too many injuries happen on kickoff returns. It's why they've made all of these changes. Like previously, they made it where players on the kicking team weren't allowed to get the 5 to 10 yard running start that they used to, that they have to wait until the ball is kicked and before they can go. They destroyed the wedge. That's no longer a legal blocking formation, etc. They've done so much to take the teeth out of the kick return that Devin Hester probably would have never been able to become the superstar returner that he was because of these rule changes. It's absolutely insane. I get it, the name of player safety, but at the same time, you're also allowing teams to have more Thursday night games, flexing Thursday night games. So I don't care what Roger Goodell had to say at the bully pulpit about their data shows that Thursday. All right, let's see the data. Let's see the data that proves that there are less injuries on Thursday night. And it's and I would have a hard time believing that it's not skewed to the fact that teams were only allowed to play one Thursday night game, at max 2, and that's if you were the Super Bowl champion that played on the opening Thursday night game, which doesn't really technically count as a Thursday night game other than the fact that it's played on Thursday night. You don't have the short turnaround. There's no game on Sunday, then turnaround on Thursday. I just don't see how 3 days rest after having 50 plus car crashes essentially happen to your body is not a player safety issue, but apparently kickoffs are. And that's where we stand at this point, is all their legislation is against kickoffs. And I mean, they did put in one other thing, that launching is a personal foul, 15-yard penalty, whether it's from 1 feet or 2. I don't know why that was a distinction not put in there before, but there's that as well. But the whole kickoff rule, I do not like. The jerseys, the other rules they made about tweaking what was a personal foul, what's not a personal foul, all those things are really semantics. But the one that's really going to affect games is that fair catch, because in this day and age, with the way the rules are, there's been a lot of teams that are what they're doing is trying to get people to return it, so they're kicking the ball short. They're making sure that their kicker doesn't just boot it out of the back of the end zone. And I think that's what they're trying to legislate out again, is that, they saw special teams coordinators were adjusting to the rules and they were still getting more kick returns out there than what the NFL liked. So they threw another wrench in the works. I think it's just, fixing something that ain't broke, just continuing to toil on something that's already as good as it's going to get when it comes to the player safety side, outside of just abolishing it. I mean, at this point, there's just really no point to have a kickoff. It's going to be a touchback, especially now with the fair catch, where if they fair catch it in the field of play, it goes to the 25, which is absolutely insane to me. Like, if you're going to do the fair catch, do it like a punt. You get it where you fair catch. You don't get a fair catch because you're scared or you don't want to, make a return or whatever, and then reward that player with, extra yardage. That part was the most insane piece to me. I hope that it's a one and done rule, because it is only approved for the 2023 season. They'll have to go back and reapprove it next off season, which this time it barely passed. So I'd be surprised if it did, but I mean, hey, Roger Goodell's got a lot of pull. He's the one that got it passed. So you never know if he can make it permanent. It's definitely possible. But let's go ahead and move on from boring rule changes to PFF ranking all 32 QBs. Who was disrespected? Who was overhyped? All of those good things we'll go through. So we'll just go ahead and give you their top 10 real quick. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes. No argument there. Number 2, Josh Allen. Again, no argument. Number 3, Joe Burrow. I'm perfectly fine with that. 4, Justin Herbert. Not mad at all. The 5 is where I start having issues. Aaron Rodgers. I get it. He's been great his whole career, but he is coming off the worst season of his career, going to a whole new team. Yes, he knows the offense. It's Nathaniel Hackett, whatever. We just saw Nathaniel Hackett completely blow it up when he finally got a chance to call plays. Since Jacksonville. It's the first time since he was in Jacksonville that he was able to call plays in Denver, and we saw the fiasco that was. So with him calling the plays in New York, I don't see it being as big of a boon as people are trying to make it out to be. The most of the success that Aaron Rodgers had was not because of Nathaniel Hackett. It was because of Mike LaFleur and his offense. That's why he had back-to-back MVP seasons. Nathaniel Hackett obviously helped. He was a coach. He was obviously really close with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers loves him. But I just don't see it being the same thing. And I mean, again, here in Denver, we've seen what happens when a new quarterback comes in and you don't put enough talent in the offensive line to help him. There's a lot of other things on that Jets team that will be better than Green Bay, mainly the defense, though. That doesn't help Aaron Rodgers when he's on the field. Obviously, it helps him when he's off the field, but when he's on the field, he's 39 years old. He has been a above average mobile quarterback most of his career, but again, he is 39 years old. The man's getting old. He can't move like he used to. He will stand back there and get pounded if that offensive line does not do remarkably better in pass protection. They're really good at run blocking. Breece Hall had a great start to the season before he got hurt, etc. But their pass blocking is suspect at best. And Aaron Rodgers with new pass catchers, new teammates, all those things are going to come into effect. I do not believe the Jets are going to be nearly as good as they are. And Aaron Rodgers, I just don't see rekindling what he was able to do in his late 20s, early 30s, in his late 30s, early 40s. That's just not how Father Time works. I know we just saw Tom Brady defy Father Time up until his mid-40s, but that's Tom Brady. Not everybody is Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers is not Tom Brady. And Tom Brady played a different game than Aaron Rodgers. So I am not okay with Aaron Rodgers being in the top 10 at this point. If he would have had another MVP season last year, I mean, hey, I couldn't argue too much. But the fact he's coming off the worst season of his career, this whole list is about not, what's the best way I could put this? Not allowing for past performance to dictate who is listed where. So this seems kind of counterintuitive to the whole purpose of this exercise for Pro Football Focus. But I digress. Let's move on to the next one. Lamar Jackson definitely should have been at 5. Jalen Hurts, again, believe he should be above Aaron Rodgers at this point. I mean, he is the guy that just went to the Super Bowl and gave Patrick Mahomes all he could handle. So how he's below Aaron Rodgers, again, unless you're going against past performance, I don't understand it. Again, this isn't supposed to be about past performance. It's supposed to be about 2023. Then you have Trevor Lawrence at 8. Not mad at it again. I think he should be up a tick. The next one I have a problem with being in the top 10 is Kirk Cousins. He does amazing things in the regular season. He definitely outperforms what you believe he should be able to do when you just look at his raw talent. But there is a definite ceiling, a hard ceiling on Kirk Cousins, and that is he is never going to win a team a championship. If he was going to, he would have done it in Minnesota by now. He has had absolutely loaded rosters that he has just completely fell apart with when it matters the most. I don't know what it is about the guy, but he just does not have a clutch gene. He cannot handle the spotlight. And so I do not like him being in the top 10, especially over the next two guys, Dak Prescott and Tua Tagovailoa. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, Dak Prescott's done a lot of the same things of choking in the playoffs, yada, yada, yada. And Tua really hasn't done anything in the playoffs. Well, they're also much younger than Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. And they've had very similar production to those two guys who are also guys that don't do anything in the playoffs. So if you're trying to put Dak Prescott up and say that he's better than, say, a Jalen Hurts, I can't agree with you. Jalen Hurts has taken his team to a Super Bowl. He's done some things in the playoffs. He's proved some things when it matters most. But when you're putting Dak Prescott up against Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins for the 2023 season, again, let's make that clear, this is about the 2023 season. And Dak Prescott and Tua Tagovailoa are below both Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. I understand Kirk had a better year than Aaron, and he definitely has a better argument to be in the top 10, but I don't believe that that's what the top 10 should be. So, first two guys I believe are too high. Way too high is Aaron Rodgers, and too high is Kirk Cousins. Now, I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers deserves to be in the bottom 15 of the league, but they definitely don't belong in the top 10. I do believe they belong in the 10 to 15 range, which is where I would put them right outside the top 10. I would probably put Aaron Rodgers just a smidge above Matthew Stafford as well as Kirk Cousins, so I'd put them at 11 and 12, knock Matthew Stafford back to 13, and then go on down the line from there. So who do I believe? Those are the two guys I believe are too high. Who do I believe is too low? The number one is going to be the fact that they put Russell Wilson at 20. And it's not just that he's at 20. He had a terrible, terrible 2023. Again, this is about 23, so he had a terrible 23. But you cannot tell me that he had a worse 2023 than Justin Fields as a quarterback. Yes, Justin Fields obviously is a better running back, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the top 32 running backs. We're talking about the top 32 quarterbacks. Justin Fields is a running back that throws the ball every once in a while. I know a lot of people hate to hear that, but it's the truth. He is a slightly more accurate Tim Tebow. Plain and simple, with a darker skin complexion. That's the only differences, is that he's a little bit more athletic, he's a tinge bit more accurate, and he has a different skin complexion. Those are the only differences between Justin Fields and Tim Tebow. And all y'all lost your minds about Tim Tebow, except for, the Tebow maniacs. We're not going to get into that. If you want to hear about those stories, go back to my YouTube. I got plenty of stories on the Breaking Broncos podcast about Tim Tebow and the insanity that his fan base was. But the fact that Justin Fields and Ryan Tannehill, who got benched for a rookie quarterback that was drafted in the third round and took him almost the entire season, and Desmond Ridder, or Malik Willis, I'm sorry, not Desmond Ridder, that's the Atlanta kid, but Malik Willis, who was essentially last year's version of Anthony Richardson, but he got drafted appropriately in the third round as opposed to third overall. But I'll digress on that. We won't go too far there. But Ryan Tannehill, again, a guy that got replaced by Malik Willis, and again this year by C.J. Stroud, or no, I apologize, Will Levis, I believe. Oh my goodness. Who did they draft? I'm sorry. I know they drafted. Yes. Okay. So I did get it right the second time. Will Levis, second round pick out of Kentucky. And he's going to replace Ryan Tannehill. I don't like Levis. He is very tight in his upper body, which is a very bad thing because that's exactly what Justin Fields, Tim Tebow, and many other busts at the QB position are. They're just overly built, jacked athletes that are just too stiff up top to be consistent in their throwing motion, and that is what leads to the inaccuracies. So, um, I just don't see how Ryan Tannehill gets put above Russell Wilson. Again, those two guys. You can definitely make a case for Daniel Jones being above Russell Wilson at 17, Jared Goff at 16. And I mean, I hate the fact that Geno Smith is in the top 15. I understand he had a pretty decent year, but it's just another case of the Case Keenums and the Brad Johnsons and those guys that just have their insane year, and then the next year the league adapts and they completely flop. I honestly think it's hilarious that Seattle has completely tied themselves to him. I understand they like him because he bows down to Pete Carroll and won't question him, unlike the way that Russell Wilson did. So there's that, but I just don't see how he repeats the performance. So really, that's my take. Those are the guys I believe are too high and too low. So with that being the case, what is my top 10 quarterbacks? Well, I'll tell you. My list is number 1, Patrick Mahomes. Number 2, Josh Allen. Number 3, Joe Burrow. Number 4, Justin Herbert. Number 5, Lamar Jackson. Number 6, Jalen Hurts. 7, Trevor Lawrence. 8, Dak Prescott. 9, Tua Tagovailoa. And then 10, we're going to go ahead and go with Matthew Stafford at this point because I love Matthew Stafford. I know I said what I said earlier, but I've just always loved Matthew Stafford. I think he's going to bounce back. The 2023 he had was not his fault. I mean, what can you do when you lose your elbow and your job is to throw? Whether it's football, baseball, doesn't matter. You don't have an elbow, you can't throw. So that is my top 10. What's yours? I would love to hear yours. Make sure you go down in the comments. Go over to e5280sports.com. Go to the Twitters. Whatever it is that you enjoy and want to interact with us, we'd love to hear what you think is the top 10. Or even if you want to go the full 32, let us know what you got, and we'd be happy to discuss. So with that being said, there's our NFL news for this week. Let's go ahead and move on to our first third of the season review for the MLB. So we are officially a third of the way through the MLB season. And everybody's got their hot takes on the new rule changes. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Me, personally, I love them. I don't see how you can see this brand of baseball that's so much quicker, so much tighter, so much more action-packed, and say you don't like it. I understand there's some weirdness, the pitch clock, and the little nuances of it. Batter has to be in there by 8 seconds. Pitcher has to be ready and looking by 15 seconds. Catcher has to be in the catcher's box by 9 seconds. Yada yada yada. All those things might seem weird to the baseball purists in us. I've been a baseball fan my whole life. I am as much a baseball lover as anyone. These rule changes have been for the better, and they have not tainted the game in the slightest. So many of you freaked out. There's been some consternation about teams that have players that tend to move a little bit slower and how it's affected them. You've seen Sandy Alcantara, after a Cy Young season, come out and have a 550 plus ERA in his first several starts, things of that nature. The no hitter has essentially been non-existent outside of a couple of attempts. Drew Smiley took a perfect game into the 8th inning, and one other pitcher took a no-hitter into the 6th at one point. The latest that a no-hitter has ever happened in the MLB is June 3rd, which happened about a decade ago. So yeah, have those things happen? Yeah, but that sacrifice to get the brand of baseball that we are now, that is going to be so more conducive to bringing in new fans. Like, yes, obviously you want to keep the old heads like me and some of these people that are complaining, but the key to having a successful business that lasts for a long time is constantly bringing in new customers. And that is what MLB is looking at. They are looking at the fact that this next generation, their attention span's not nearly as long as the previous generations. All of those tropes and things that are being thrown at millennials and Gen Zers, etc., they have some merit to it. Obviously, that's why MLB made the changes. I mean, the 3 inches extra bases, the disengagement rules for pitchers where they can only throw over twice in a bat unless the player steals a base. I love those things. I love the stolen base. I love the small ball. I love pure baseball. I am not just one of these casuals that wants to see dingers and strikeouts. I love the nuances of the game. And that's what this is bringing back. It's bringing back much more of the gamesmanship instead of just slow playing. Like, I know a lot of y'all want to talk about, like, there's players that like to, use stepping off the mound or stepping out of the batter's box to play some games between the pitcher and catcher and the little cat and mouse game that they always play. It's gotten way, way out of hand. Way out. It's not like it was when I was a kid and watching baseball with the Larry Walkers and Dante Bichettes and Barry Bondses and things of that nature, where, they only did things like that in big situations. Lately, up until this year, you had guys doing it on 0-0 counts in the first inning of a game in March or April or May. Like, that's way too much, bro. Way too much. And it really, really just bogged the game down and made it unfun for anybody that was a casual. Yes, there was guys like me that could still go in there and enjoy the game and, go into the nuances and stuff, but that's not where the sustainability is. Yes, diehards are needed, but it's the casuals that bring in the cash that allow the leagues to exist for those diehards. That's why I always laugh at people that talk about bandwagoners and casual fans as if they're just unnecessary parts of the game. They're not. They're absolutely necessary. And that's what these rules were meant to target, was those young kids tuning in. They want to see an exciting brand of baseball. It's why basketball has become so popular recently, is that it's a constant action game. Same thing with football. Like, yeah, you have the little lulls here and there, and it does turn off some people at that point, but it's still action-packed enough to keep bringing in new fans, even with these newer generations. That's where MLB is trying to get. Yes, they are the second highest grossing league in all of sports in America at just over $9 billion, right behind the NFL, which is the prime example of a sports league at over $12 billion a year. So obviously MLB is not hurting, but they're obviously also a successful business that has done a very good job of changing with the times over multiple centuries at this point almost. Like, baseball has been around so long, people. Things have to change. They have to keep up with the times, and that's what they're trying to do. So that's my take. What is your take? I would really love to hear what you believe. Do you like the rules? Is there some you do, some you don't? Do you hate them all? Do you love them all? Let us know, again, down in the comments, on the Twitters, wherever the case may be. My Twitter's right down here at the bottom. You can go to 5280 Sports. I'm following them. They're all over my feed. It's easy to get them there as well. So make sure you check them out. Give them a follow. Show me some love. I always appreciate it. But let's go ahead and move on from the rules. Let's talk about what teams have had early struggles that will rebound. I think one of the biggest teams to have some struggles that will go ahead and turn things around are going to be teams like the Astros, of course. They had a really sluggish start, ended up giving the Rangers, I think at the most was a 9-game lead in the AL West. They have turned that down to a 3-game lead by going 8-2 in their last 10, showing signs of life. But the one in the West that's shocked me the most with the least production is going to be the Mariners, who I believed with Kelenic and Rodriguez and that starting rotation along with that solid bullpen would at least be a plus team, an over 500 team. Right now, they are sitting at 25-24, just barely over 500. So they are there, but they are 6 games back of the Rangers in that vaunted West. I think the AL West is going to be an absolute gauntlet to get through. There's going to be a lot of teams beating themselves up because even the Angels are at 28-23. I think they're playing a little bit above themselves. But the other team that's way lower than they should be and a bit shocking is the Blue Jays at 26-24 in a division, again, that's a monster. The AL Beast is insane. Every team in that division is above 500. I don't think I've ever seen that this far into the season where every single team is above 500. Obviously, the Rays are leading the division at 36-15, but the Blue Jays and Red Sox are tied for being in the basement at 26-24, which would put them in a tie for first place in the AL Central, and would also put them in the basement of the AL West. But still, that's just insane. Think about that. An entire division above 500. So that's the American League. What's a team in the National League that is underperforming that you see coming back up? And that's going to be the Arizona Cardinals. They're a team that's always in it in the end. They have all-time greats in Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt. They went out and got Contreras in the offseason to be the catcher to replace Yadier Molina. He started off slow, but after a benching seems to be picking it up. And that starting rotation they always seem to find guys that come in, eat innings, have a low 3 ERA, if not sub 3 ERA, bunch of strikeouts, big arms. They'll figure it out. They'll fix it. They haven't played nearly up to par on defense. It's been really shocking, especially considering the 2 guys I just mentioned being 2 of the best defenders at their position, maybe all time, but at least in the game today, in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. We all know their accomplishments. I mean, I got my guy right here. Got my poppet. Just so you can see him. Let me move to the left. But that man has played below his standards, and really that whole team has. So St. Louis, I see them being able to pull it together and at least making it to the playoffs, but I think they'll even overtake the Brewers. As we've seen, the Pirates and Cubs have really kind of come back to earth. They're 4-6 and 3-7 respectively over their last 10 games. So as much as they were, a great story to begin with, just kind of what happens in the MLB. There's always a couple of teams at the beginning of the season that start hot and then cool off and just completely fade away by the end of the grind that is 162 games. And then you have teams that start slow, pick it up, aka Houston in the AL, St. Louis in the NL. But what do you believe? Who do you believe is an early contender that is a pretender, and who is an early struggle that's going to become a contender before it's all said and done? Excuse me. So, with that all being said, again, down in the comments, let us know what you think. It's not just be here to scream at you. I want to have these discussions. I want to talk to y'all about these things because there's things that obviously interest me and I'm passionate about, and I want to hear what are your interests, thoughts, and passions as well. So make sure, go down in the comments section, leave whatever comments you would like. We will reply. Go to the Twitters, go to the Instas, go to the Facebooks, wherever it is that you're comfortable. Leave us the comments, the tweets, whatever the case may be. We will happily have these conversations with you, and we would love to hear your takes on all of these topics. So make sure you go give me some love. Again, right there's my let's go this way. Right there's my Twitter. That's my personal Twitter. I also have a business Twitter at The Answer is 42. Same as the podcast. And then you can also go to 5280 Sports at 5280 Sports on Twitter. The 5280 Sports Facebook page. We're really everywhere. So go to your socials, put in either my name, The Answer is 42, or 5280 Sports. You'll find us one way or another. We'll make sure we get the links down in the description as well for you to make it as easy as possible, because we want to have these conversations and have it fun. Don't want you just searching for us. So make sure you go ahead and leave those down there. Leave us a like. Just hit all the red buttons, launch the nukes, and pave the way so we can bring you the news the way you deserve it. And we'll be here each week. I know this week we're a little late. We had some technical difficulties, but we are here. But going forward, every Monday, we will be dropping a new podcast. The Answer is 42, covering the major storylines across all major sports. So make sure ahead and check us out every week. We do appreciate y'all showing up, giving us some love. And for the Answer is 42 podcast and elevation5280sports.com, I am your host, Dan Wetstein. And don't question the blue.